Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, November 29th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Florida congressional map for the 2022 midterm elections. Now, if you remember back just about a week ago, I covered the first set of maps that were proposed by the Florida State Senate. Both the House and the Senate are Republican controlled, but in the Republican State Senate, there were maps here that were drawn in a way that was not as aggressive of a gerrymander as many Republicans and Democrats expected to see from the state of Florida. And that was a big deal. I mean, looking at our map from the video that I covered, we can actually see it right here, in which it was the 8008 map, in which the map really didn't change. All it did was add in an additional highly competitive seat, and the rest remained the same. And this was largely due to the fact that Florida had added in an additional seat because of redistricting. Now, looking at this map here, many people were shocked, primarily because Florida is the largest state besides Texas in which Republicans now have control over redistricting. Texas finalized their map, in which they didn't do necessarily a lot of damage to the Democratic Party in a sense, but what they did was prevent the competitive seats from remaining competitive and ultimately shored up all of the Democrats, all of the Republicans, leaving only one toss-up seat with an open incumbent. But taking a look at the state of Ohio, another state with a large population, the Republican Party effectively drew themselves 13 out of the 15 total districts in terms of the map. So looking at it, in a year in which everything else was equal, the Republican Party would be able to win in these districts, 13 out of the 15, leaving the Democratic Party just 13% in terms of total representation. And many people expected this to be a similar case out of the state of Florida, but as you can see in this Senate map, that ultimately was not the case. One thing that was surprising was that they did not target Representative Stephanie Murphy. They did make her district slightly less Democratic, but ultimately they made it still a Democratic-leaning district relative to the rest of the nation. Compared to the old map, it was Democrat +5 actually, and now it's Democrat +1 under the Senate map. But what the Florida House did was instead of taking the approach of the Florida Senate and agreeing with the Florida Senate, they decided to move forward with a gerrymander. Now, it's not nearly as aggressive as the one in Ohio, and, I'm not even trying to make that case, but I am going to point out that this is an aggressive gerrymander, and it specifically targets Representative Stephanie Murphy. And you can actually see, in the breakdown by congressional district for all of these toss-up districts, most of them lean towards the Republican Party. For instance, Charlie Crist District, Republican lean +2. The 15th District, Republican lean +4. The 28th District, Republican lean +3. The Democrats do have a lean in the 14th District and also an even lean in the 27th District, but the point is that if you are taking all of these toss-up districts, you really only have one that leans towards the Democrats, and considering our national environment in the most recent election, in which Joe Biden won by a margin of 4.5%, and you could even make that case with the Florida 14th District, almost all of these toss-up districts are Republican-leaning, and all of them are nearly there. So looking at this Florida map, what this also does is, again, they target Representative Stephanie Murphy. They draw her into a new district. Now, right around this area, you are talking about the Orlando area. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of Democratic support. Taking a look at the presidential election results from 2020, Donald Trump won the state by a margin of 3.3%. But specifically in the state of Florida, you can see, specifically in the Orlando area, Joe Biden did phenomenally well. He was able to win 3 main counties in the surrounding area, and it was pretty large. Looking at the older map here, taking a look at this is the Senate map here, here's the House map I want to show you, there used to actually be 3 Democratic districts. Stephanie Murphy with a Democrat +5 partisan lean, Darren Soto with a Democrat +4 partisan lean, and Val Demings with a Democrat +21. Instead of providing Democrats with those 2 maps, just as they were in the Senate, with 2 safe Democratic seats and 1 Democratic lean seat, in this new map, it gives Democrats 2 safe seats and a Trump district with a Republican lean of 11 against another incumbent, which means that the incumbent will be facing off against another incumbent, and therefore there is no incumbency advantage for this district. Ultimately, of course, benefiting the Republican Party. Because when you take a look at the 2020 election for Stephanie Murphy, she won by a margin of 12 points in this district. It was about 5 points to the left, and now, if we were to apply it to the same margin, Stephanie Murphy might technically still be able to win, but only by a margin of about 1 or 2%, and considering she'll be running against another incumbent, well, that makes it a bit more difficult to see how they could end up winning. looking at here, she would be running against, I believe that is Michael Waltz in the 6th district here. Yes, and that used to be, was also the 6th district. Now it is entirely the 6th district. He won by 21 points. So he will still have that incumbency advantage and still likely have the energy on his side. And consequently, Stephanie Murphy would be removed from her district entirely. And taking a look at the area around the Tampa area, yet again, another region in which Democrats do well. 2020 presidential election, you can see here that in both of these counties, Joe Biden was able to win. It wasn't by a large margin, but it was still a victory regardless, and it's still a major city. Taking a look at the old map compared to the new one, there may have been one Democratic district, and then taking a look at the ones closer in, I believe this is where the new one was added into. Charlie Crist had a Republican lean of +1. Democrats had a partisan lean of Democrat +12. In this new map here, this draws an incumbent, a Democrat, into a Republican +4 district from previously a pretty solid district, arguably, for the Democratic Party. Charlie Crist remains in a Republican area, and then the open seat just so happens to be the one with the partisan lean with Democrats in the advantage. But the point being that they're drawing out a Democratic incumbent. They're leaving the open race, which has a partisan lean for Democrats. But again, open races typically favor the side with the energy on their side. So in this case would be the Republicans, and then Charlie Crist, now running for office, is in a more Republican district, which means with that opening up, if he ends up on the ballot for the governor's race rather than on the House map here, ultimately that 13th district will more than likely flip to the GOP. So you can start to see here why this House map was drawn in such a way and why Democrats are pretty upset with this map. There's an additional map that was proposed as well, which would solidify half of the state's districts into safe Republican seats. Again, an additional gerrymander. For a state that was decided by narrow margins back in the 2020 election, for a state that previously had 14 Republicans to 13 Democrats, I mean, this state does get pretty close. But Republicans are trying to prevent this possibility that Democrats do take the advantage in the state of Florida. Take 2018, for instance. The Democrats got very close. They again won 13 districts across the state of Florida to the Republican Party's 14. Fast forward to 2020, a better year for the GOP. The Republicans were able to win 16 seats. They were able to flip a considerable amount in the state of Florida. But the fact that Democrats got so close to winning the majority of seats in 2018 was very alarming for the GOP. And in this new map, it would make it very difficult for that to happen. Not only do half of the state seats go solidly for the GOP, but they also have a Republican leaning one. In addition, in these 4 highly competitive seats, they don't all lean for the Democrats. Stephanie Murphy is still in a district where Democrats do have that partisan lean. But again, it also isn't by the margin that it used to be. Democrat +5 is not the same as Democrat +1, especially since 2020 had so many close House elections, every single vote matters. Taking a look at these open areas, you can begin to see what is being done here. Rather than allow Democrats to come to a point where 2018 was a near perfect representation of what the statewide races said compared to the House elections, they are making it so the GOP has that inherent advantage in every single election. So they aren't letting up in the way that the state Senate did, and they are specifically targeting one individual House of Representatives member, and it is very clear what the Florida House of Representatives is doing. So taking a look at the map, what moves on from here? Well, there actually have been cases in the past where the Florida House and the Florida Senate will propose 2 different maps. And in cases such as these, it might end up going to a court system who will choose to adopt one of the Senate or the House proposal for the eventual next new map. Now, considering that the Florida State Supreme Court is pretty right-leaning, I see no doubts that they would choose the more aggressive gerrymander unless they were to go with what the Senate says, but that would be pretty unexpected, to be quite honest with you. But all around here, I think that this new House map is pretty much fulfilling what many GOP representatives and many members of the Republican Party entirely wanted to see from the state of Florida. Now, again, it's not aggressive like the one in Ohio was, but it still is pretty substantial to see. The fact that this House map is disagreeing pretty considerably with the Senate map shows that there is some type of disconnect between the Florida House of Representatives and the Florida State Senate. And considering now that the Democratic Party would fare better under the Senate map, I honestly don't know if that one would pass altogether. The point of these maps for both sides, I think, is to advance their own party's agenda, and that's how it's been. While unfortunate, that is just the reality that we are in. For instance, if you take a look at the brand new map from Illinois, Democrats have a total of 14 out of the 17 districts here. They give the GOP 17% in terms of total representation in a state that they win 40% of the vote in pretty routinely. In the state of Florida, it wouldn't be as bad for Democrats, but it still is pretty considerable. On the contrary, compared to Illinois, Ohio released a very similar map, just as bad. Ohio, in fact, worse, in my opinion, because it gives Democrats 13% in terms of total representation, giving them 2 out of 15 seats across a state in which Democrats win more of the vote than the GOP does in Illinois, with the Democrats winning about 45% of the vote pretty consistently across the state of Ohio. In addition to that, there is a Democratic senator from the state of Ohio, and they nearly elected a Democrat back in the governor elections in 2018. So what I now see from the state of Florida, what is my takeaway from this, is that the GOP is beginning to recognize the aggressive nature and really trying to follow through with it. The Florida House Redistricting Committee knows exactly what they're doing with this map. They are trying to intentionally draw out certain incumbent Democrats and draw other Democrats into less safe districts. They also recognize that some of these Democrats are not going to be running for re-election. I don't think it's a coincidence that some of these Democrats, such as Charlie Crist, are ending up in a more Republican district just in the year in which they would leave it as an open seat, allowing for a member of the GOP to enter in as that outsider type position, especially considering Joe Biden's approval rating at this point in time. Looking at the state of Florida in these new House maps, regardless of what type of map you're looking at, of course the GOP has the upper hand, but I will say that this is less aggressive than we previously thought, but the bar is so low on the ground that really anything we seem to applaud as bipartisanship. Now, this obviously isn't bipartisanship. If it was, we would see a map similar to the one we saw back in 2018, standardized across the state. But to ignore the real reality that the GOP has won multiple elections and to act as if they wouldn't use that to their advantage is to be naive. The Florida Republican Party is drawing this map in a way to benefit themselves. No way around it. The same thing that the Democrats do across a number of their states that they control. But I will say that we are beginning to see this big divide between what the Florida House wants and the Florida Senate wants. And I honestly am very intrigued to see what the final result will be, because one of them will allow Democrats to probably hold on to many of their districts here in 2022, but the other map could very well draw out a sitting representative and bring our map to a point where if we were to apply it based off this map, let's go ahead and see here, if we can add it up based off what it's saying down here. The amount of districts here, giving the GOP 15 Republican-leaning seats, the Democrats 8, with 5 highly competitive seats, Republican-lean, Democratic-lean, Republican-lean, Republican-lean, and even, assuming that even one goes to the GOP, considering there's an incumbent there and the national environment, that would give the GOP 19 out of 28 districts, meaning Democrats would get 9. So on this older map, you can actually see here, with the 14-3, what does this translate to? Well, 13 out of 27 for the Democratic Party would be 48%. Just so happens they won 48% on the governor and Senate level here in the state of Florida. The GOP, of course, would be getting around 51%. Taking a look at this new map, what would 18 seats get the GOP or actually 19 seats out of a total of 28? It would give them 68% in terms of total representation. So yes, you can start to see the divide. In 2020 at least, the map was a little bit better for the GOP, but still here, it wasn't 68%. What this margin was 59%. It was 59% for the Republican Party across the state of Florida, which means that, again, this map only continues to be a much more aggressive gerrymander. And it is quite fascinating, if you ask me, to see a major disconnect between both sides aligning very similarly, politically speaking, to hold very different maps. For the sake of both parties, I would say that the Senate map makes more sense just because it is fairer, it is more representative of the state's political ideology and political leaning, but I'm also not going to deny the fact that Democrats and Republicans have been playing hardball when it comes down to redistricting recently, and for the Florida House to propose this map isn't necessarily a surprise, but it definitely is different from what we were expecting the map would be. And that's why I made that video in the past saying maybe Florida Republicans have let up on the Democratic Party, but I no longer think that is the case. I really want to see what ends up being the reality by the time we reach this new map. I think that in 2022, both Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis will be elected to their respective positions, Marco Rubio in the United States Senate, Ron DeSantis in the governorship, but I also want to see all of these House districts. They have until about June of 2022 to actually finalize this map. I do not think they will take that long. It will make it very inconvenient for everyone, Democrats, Republicans alike, if they wait that long to confirm it, but they do have a bit of a deadline, which means a bit later of a deadline, which means that they really don't have to worry about this until the next coming months, because that's when it becomes increasingly more urgent, but they do not need to pass this map right now. So there definitely can be a bit of deliberation. I would not be surprised if they decided to pass it within the next month or two, just because they want to get things officially underway, want to get primaries officiated, but technically speaking, they have a bit later down the line to go. But all eyes on Florida right now, especially as the state that is the most populous besides California, that is yet to certify their brand new congressional districts for 2022. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.